of the first dimension. A brilliant runner with moves so elusive they simply call him Sweetness. The Chicago Bears, number 34, Mr. Walter Payton.
The running game. As the late Vince Lombardi would attest, it is pro football's purest form of movement and energy. The necessary skills of strength, speed, and endurance demand that a great runner also be a great athlete. No man more gracefully fits that description than number 34 of the Chicago Bears, Walter Payton. And in 1984, after becoming the NFL's all-time leader in total yardage, he set out to break the often termed untouchable rushing record of Jim Brown.
Walter Payton program, break the record. Walter Payton, soon to be souvenir book. See Walter Payton break the record.
This has got to be one of the greatest days, not only for him, but for the fans who've sat out through 10 years or whatever of it. Oh,
through rain and
snow and sleet and hail. But Walter has been the man who's made it for us these past years.
This is my first football game ever in life that I've seen outside of television. And it's the history of it that really brought me down here.
The eyes of his ever-faithful following were upon him, and on this date with destiny, Walter Payton did not disappoint.
Walter needs 2 to break the record. High formation, quick pitch to Walter, looking for the record, cuts back, he's got it, he's out of it at 25 to the 26-yard line. Walter Payton becomes the National Football League all-time leading rusher, surpassing Jim Brown, and that's the equivalent to Hank Aaron breaking Babe Ruth's all-time home run record. And listen to the standing ovation.
The motivating drive for me has been for the athletes that have tried but yet and still have failed to reach that certain achievement. And also the athletes that didn't get an opportunity to, like the Overstreets and the Delaney's and the Brian Piccolos. You know, this simplifies what the game is made of. And what I did out there today is a reflection of those guys because they made the sacrifices as well. And it's a tribute to me to bestow this honor upon them. Thank you.
It was fitting that on the day he surpassed the legendary Jim Brown, the man they call Sweetness humbly paid tribute to the men who had paid their own share of dues. Although he was the Bears' first-round draft pick in 1975, this 5'11" graduate of Jackson State made an unheralded entry into pro football. In his first year, Payton spent much of his time refining his skills behind the line of scrimmage. But by 1977, he had replaced the word potential with that of performance, capping off a stellar season by being cited the league's MVP. On the surface, he did not seem as swift as O.J. Simpson or as tough as Jim Brown. But after he easily ran through defenses specifically designed to stop him, many NFL head coaches drew their own conclusions.
Walter has 2 qualities that you don't really have in one running back normally. He has great speed, but not only is that, he has great strength for his size. Not only do you have to plug the hole up, but you got to plug the hole up twice, you know, because he's going to run through you, he's going to run through your tacklers. So when you combine that kind of strength with good balance and great running ability, then you've got to have a premier running back.
He's got a great heart. And by that I mean, I've never seen him where I thought he was intimidated. You know, in a running back, you're going to get some great shots on you. I don't care if you're carrying that ball enough, you're going to get hit. Yeah, Walter Payton, I've never seen him get hit when he didn't get up off the ground mad, you know, that he didn't get hit and wanting a chance to dish it out.
he'll jam you in the face with a stiff arm. He'll do anything that he can do to keep you from tackling him. And I think that's an excellent trait in a running back.
The ability to ward off defenders is just one of his many traits. Unlike numerous gifted runners who excel only when handed the ball, Payton is a diverse offensive machine, as dangerous as a receiver as he is a runner. In addition to catching and running, Payton also presents a threat as a passer, a not-so-subtle skill that enhances his team's ability to stretch an unsuspecting defense.
You know, Walter can throw the football probably as far as anybody on the football team. We use him because he's such a threat. When he gets the football in his hands, people have to come to him. And if they force quick, they usually leave something behind them open.
It is safe to say that Walter Payton capably fills out the portrait of the perfectly well-rounded player. But if there's one particular talent that stands out, it just may be the sixth sense he has for getting the football into the end zone.
Being a running back, it constitutes certain things that you have to do that everybody has to do. You know, certain, the phonetics of the game, the footsteps, the crossover, the rolls, the approach block, you know, all those things are basic. But when you get to it, the individuality of the game is what you have inside of you, the determination and what you want to accomplish. That's what separates the people. It's the determination and not willing to settle for second best.
It's like somebody once said that when the good Lord was going to make a halfback, he just chiseled a certain type of body and he gave it to Walter Payton. And I mean no offense to any of the great players who have ever played the game, but I think he's the most complete football player that I've ever seen, and maybe that's ever played the game of football.
Walter Payton, the personification of movement and energy. Pro football's all-time leading rusher and perhaps the game's greatest all-around athlete. A man a step ahead of all the rest. Truly a superstar for today. Coming up next, a look at a legend, historic Fenway Park, when Stroh's Circle of Sports continues.
This week.
As time goes by, as you realize that baseball is blessed with some ballparks with fabulously rich tradition, Yankee Stadium, Wrigley Field, and of course Fenway Park. With its green monster wall out in left field and its cozy size, Fenway has a look and feel all its own. It's a wonderful place to watch a game. And the Red Sox have called it home for a long time. A legend in baseball, Fenway Park.
No one can stop the passing of time, but in some places time seems to pass more slowly. In a ballpark, for instance, especially this ballpark.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to Fenway Park, home of the Boston Red Sox.
A lyric little bandbox is how writer John Updike once put it. Visiting players may not care to put it as fondly, but there is a strange lyric logic to the way in which foul lines, poles, screens, and multi-dimensional walls jigsaw and juxtapose one another to pose such endless puzzles and hazards to players. Fenway is baseball's oldest and smallest ballpark. It holds together the local color of New England, the air of history, and enough off-the-wall quirks to make a baseball game appear not quite the same as it would in other places. familiar as the sunset is to the evening, so is this ballpark to Red Sox baseball. Fenway did, however, have a forerunner, the Huntington Avenue Baseball Grandstand, which held less than 10,000 overflowing fans. That was before a new owner named John I. Taylor turned the Boston Americans into the Boston Red Sox, while commissioning blueprints for construction of a larger park in Fenway. It opened in 1912 with a left field wall even odder than the one that stands today, a 10-foot mound called Duffy's Cliff, where fans and left fielder Duffy Lewis became most uncommonly acquainted. The Red Sox also found 1912 uncommonly successful, largely because their fireballing ace Smokey Joe Wood went 34-5 that year. Wood armed up against the great Walter Johnson in a September pitching duel of historic, if not hysteric, proportions. Smokey Joe derailed the big train 1-0 before leading the Red Sox with 3 victories over the Giants to a world championship. The Red Sox appeared primed to win many more, and behind a young pitcher named Babe Ruth, quickly won 3 more world titles before the infamous Harry Frazee sold Ruth and several other stars to the Yankees. If that didn't, as some insist, make the roof cave in, a fire in 1926 did make the bleachers cave in. The bleachers weren't restored until 1934, when a young and deeply devoted owner named Thomas A. Yawkey initiated long-lasting changes at Fenway. Yawkey purchased the club several days after inheriting a small fortune and quickly spent $2 million Depression dollars by installing lights, replacing much of the wooden structure with concrete, and erecting an impossible left field wall, which would later come to be known as the Big Green Monster. The ballpark soon became a favorite of fans and players alike, and not surprisingly, so did Mr. Yawkey.
Mr. Yawkey comes over and he says, Bernardo, I'm Mr. Yawkey. And he sits down with me and starts talking. I couldn't believe it was Mr. Yawkey. I said, here's the owner of the ball club. Got a work t-shirt, brown pants, work shoes on, and talking to Bernie Carbone. He calls me Bernardo. And after that, I came to the ballpark early almost every day just to talk with him. It was like my grandfather.
Tom Yawkey passed away in 1976, leaving his initials, along with those of his wife Jean, stamped in Morse code upon the park as a subtle reminder that not even death can separate the Yawkeys from Fenway.
Most ballparks have a lot of commercials on the wall. That white or yellow, when it merges with the baseball coming out of the pitcher's hand, becomes difficult to see. And Yawkey, of course, was number one a fan, probably the greatest baseball fan of all time. He loved baseball, and he showed it in every way.
We'll have more from Fenway Park, including an inside look at the Big Green Monster right after these messages. And still to come, we'll go down memory lane with Johnny Bench when Stroh's Circle of Sports continues. Despite the smallest seating capacity in the majors and despite the ups and downs of the Red Sox, Fenway Park still draws a healthy flow of very loyal fans, same as it has for many decades.
The fans who are associated with this ballpark, all of us feel a part of it. I don't believe in ghosts, but sometimes you can walk in here with the lights dimmed at night after when the cleanup crews are there, and you can remember an awful lot of the things that have happened.
As when Ted Williams happened to be batting in his home park when Rip Sewell delivered his renowned Ephus pitch during the 1946 All-Star Game. Ephus got creamed, and so did the National League as Williams homered twice in an 11-0 victory.
I was the bat boy for the National League All-Star team, and it was very thrilling and exciting because there was a lot of kidding between the dugout and Teddy. And they knew that the Sewell who threw the pitch, and Teddy just smiled, bink, popped it out of here, and really popped it. I was the clubhouse man in the home side when Teddy hit his last home run, and I was with him in the clubhouse for a good 20 minutes after that, he and I alone.
And All Alone often describes how many a player is made to feel when contending with the imperatives of Fenway's territorial or conspiratorial dimension.
This is a ballpark that is conducive to humor and strange things happening, no question about it. I've seen baseball players chase baseballs around Fenway Park and get them mixed up with a dog. We've had a dog out there, a cat, birds of all kinds, a rat, a rabbit. We've had all kinds of animals out. I don't know where they've come from, by the way, and there wasn't even a circus in town.
Of course, Boston hardly needs the big top when it has its own monster, or green monster, as some call the cozy but towering left field wall. Some tell stories of how the monster turned flies into homers, homers into singles, or how it turned the score around.
I remember a story last year, opening day. They were playing the Detroit Tigers, and a kid I was out there working with put one of the yellow numbers up, because when you put a yellow number up, you put it in when the inning is still going on, and he put the number up backwards, and I guess a lot of people caught it on TV and it was in the paper.
The wall will act as friend or foe depending on the point of view, but those who've had a bird's eye point of view claim the wall becomes friendlier if you understand it properly.
To play the wall right, properly, you have to use your complete physical ability plus a very astute mental ability. For instance, Ted Williams, when he first came here to play, he wasn't exceptionally fast. He couldn't throw outstandingly. But as the years went along and he worked at it, he became an outstanding left fielder for this ballpark. Carl Yastrzemski came. He played left field. He had more physical ability than Teddy. He could play a little better that way to start with, but he developed, also improved himself, and they both mentally conquered that wall as pertaining to the game. Notice it sometime. Watch them. Watch the guys that hardly ever played, and you see how awkward they'll look compared to someone who plays there a lot.
And with the wall 315 feet away, many pitchers wish they didn't have to pitch there at all. In fact, Yankee ace left-hander Whitey Ford scarcely did.
Whitey Ford was here for an inning, and Stengel bought him a six-pack and sent him back to Kenmore Hotel and said, "You'll never pitch there again."
Boston fans may have preferred to see more of Ford or the Red Sox win the World Championship, which has eluded them since 1918, but they've seen enough to know that Fenway Park baseball is hard to beat.
The primary thing that the fan in New England, not only Boston, New England wants, is a good representative team. And they've had their share of wonderful athletes and wonderful successes. They've won pennants, but they haven't won the World Series, but they've had hundreds of thrills. And they've accepted that. And someday they will win the World Series. And I hope I'm around to see it.
There's so many moments that can be captured. For me, I guess it was winning a 75 World Series. We had been involved in two of them. We had lost. We went to Boston, and we won. And the moment we walked into the clubhouse, I was a world champion, but so was Terry Crowley and Merv Rettenman and Bill Plummer, who sat on the bench and watched. And for the coaches and the trainers and all the organization, but for 25 players, we were all world champions, and nobody could ever take the ring away from us. They could have the money, they could do what they want with that, but for me and for those people to be a world champion is something that can never be replaced.
Next up, we'll find out whatever became of the pitcher they call the Spaceman, Bill Lee, when Stroh's Circle of Sports continues.
Alex, 2 cold Strohs. Where do you see this? Just open the refrigerator. Just open one bottle. Just open the other. Now he's pouring yours. Now he's pouring mine. Alex, you better be drinking your water.
Stroh's and Stroh Light for great taste and good times.
Out here, it's me alone against the course. But in the financial world, you need all the help you can get. You need the Payne Weber Army behind you.
Even golf legends can use some financial backup. Payne Weber is ready to roll, putting all its resources at your command. We believe the quality of life just might depend on the quality of your financial services.
Thank you, Payne Weber. Now that's the kind of army you want behind you.
Last year, almost 500,000 runners in 123 cities took part in the Stroh's Run for Liberty, a series of 8-kilometer races with all the proceeds from entry fees going toward restoring the Statue of Liberty. Well, next month, the Run for Liberty kicks off again, and we want to give you a glimpse of this most worthwhile event.
Stroh's Run for Liberty will take place on October 12th, 2 weeks ahead of the 99th anniversary of the Statue of Liberty. For its centennial celebration, America has pledged to restore the famed statue, which stands as a beacon symbolizing the spirit of America. This year, the Stroh's Run for Liberty will again be a major fundraiser in the battle to restore the great lady's appearance. The Run for Liberty will take place in 127 cities across the United States and on 7 military bases. On race day, each participant will receive a medallion formed from pieces of the Statue of Liberty, parts that had to be replaced in the restoration. Along with these medallions, each of the runners will receive a certificate of verification, one signed by Lee Iacocca, chairman of the restoration effort. This is the second year the Stroh Brewery Company has sponsored the Run for Liberty. In addition to the funds generated by the entry fees, Stroh's has pledged an additional $3 million to the Restoration Fund. Just as important as the money, it's an opportunity for Americans to support the efforts to save a symbol and a byword that has meant so much to this great country.
I think it was Charles Dickens who coined the phrase eccentricities of genius. Well, I'm not sure if the man you're about to meet is a genius, but he is very bright and even more eccentric. They called him the Spaceman, and the name fit Bill Lee to a T.
The city of Moncton, a sleepy Canadian town nestled in the heart of New Brunswick, one of the 4 maritime provinces. If you've got the chance, it's a great place to fish. And Bill Lee, who's currently playing semi-pro baseball in Moncton, has plenty of time for hobbies like fishing. 10 years ago, Fenway Park in Boston was home to Bill Lee. To some, he was the spaceman. But when it came to pitching, his style was close to the ground.
I kept the ball down, kept the ball in the infield, didn't walk anybody, kept the ball in the ballpark. Everybody's ready to play. You work as fast as you can, and that keeps everybody on their toes. Even when I pitched behind, I pitched well because I worked fast. And I would take a little off. 2-1, 3-1, I'd take a little off my fastball. I'd choke it back, I'd get more sink on it. Guys would be more aggressive at the plate, they'd hit more ground balls to Burleson.
Good pitching and great hitting brought Boston to the '75 World Series. Bill Lee started 2 games and pitched reasonably well, but his contributions were overshadowed by the likes of Fisk and Tiant, Rose, Morgan, and even Bernie Carbo. It was Carbo who came off the bench with 2 out in the 8th inning of Game 6 and crushed this 3-run home run that tied it all up and set the stage for Fisk's 12th inning heroics. But the following season, Carbo was traded, and Bill Lee made his displeasure known.
2 pitch hit home runs in the '75 World Series, and how was he rewarded? His wife was pregnant. He had bought a house in Massachusetts. He was all ready to go. They told him he was on the club, and the last day of spring training, they sent him to Milwaukee. That was disgusting. That's the hardest thing I could take about baseball.
In '78, the Red Sox bitterly lost their division to the Yankees. As the Sox skidded, Lee sat. He was no longer in favor with manager Don Zimmer.
Bill Lee's lost 6 in a row. He's 10-10. So we got 4 games with the Yankees, and so he's got a 12-4 lifetime record against the Yankees. You know, we're going to win it without Bill Lee. Didn't work that way, Don. Didn't work that way. Bucky Dent, long fly ball left field.
tell it goodbye. And I was gone after that game, too. I was traded on December 7th. Pearl Harbor Day.
It was goodbye, Boston. Bonjour, Montreal. A new league, a new city, and a new look for Bill Lee. In his first season with the Expos, Lee was outstanding with a 16-10 record and a 3.04 ERA. Although never winning big, the Expos had a good young team, and Lee thought second baseman Rodney Scott was a big reason why. But in 1982, Montreal released Scott, and once again, Lee took a stand in behalf of a teammate.
He was cool breeze. And when you're cool breeze, how can they want you to be hyperactive and be, you know, you have the nickname, and if you're nonchalant, they say you're lethargic, you're a shifty nigger, things like that. He was the furthest thing from lethargic. They treated him really poorly in Montreal, and I said, that's it. I say, when you start treating guys like that, you know, using him as a scapegoat, I said, I ain't showing up today.
These days, Bill Lee shows up for the semi-pro Moncton Mets. After walking out in Montreal, he was soon given his own release from the Expos. This past spring, Lee had a tryout with the Phoenix Giants, San Francisco's AAA farm team. It was no surprise to him that he didn't make that club, but Lee is convinced he can still pitch.
I got an ERA of 0.55. I still give up some long home runs, so that means I'm still throwing hard. Heck, the funny thing is, I was in spring training, and I knew I wasn't going to get a shot. But anyway, one day they brought the jugs gun out, and they were timing me, and I didn't ask anything. And finally, a guy comes up after me and says, Bill, you know how hard you were throwing? I said, 84 miles an hour. I said, I didn't throw that hard when I pitched for the Red Sox. I didn't throw that hard for 4 years. I said, I get people out because I don't throw hard. I said, I know I can pitch. You know? Let the hitters prove I can't pitch.
Playing semi-pro ball in Eastern Canada may not be the quickest route back to the big league. But as always, Bill Lee does things on his own terms, whether or not he has a price to pay.
I am happy, you know, but there's that one little side of me, you know, the left arm has been cut off, more or less. And if I'm not allowed to use my left arm, you know, I'll take up golf right-handed, you know, but I love to pitch. I love to go to my mouth and get rosin. You know, I love to feel that tackiness of the ball. I love to throw sinkers in the dirt, you know, and I love to throw sliders. And that had been taken away from me. But, you know, if 9/10 of me is happy, then, you know, the majority of me is happy.
Bill Lee may feel like he's living in exile, but if so, it's nice to know there's always fishing.
Yeah, the rain's good for fish. That's right. That's exactly. First day I want to go fishing, first day it's rain in 12 days. Boy, my luck.
Coming up next, we'll conclude our one-on-one with the incomparable O.J. Simpson when Stroh's Circle of Sports continues.
Conclusion of our one-on-one with Football Hall of Famer and Monday Night Football commentator O.J. Simpson.
Retirement for somebody who had the success that you had to be a very traumatic experience. Your retirement speech was a very moving thing up in San Francisco. Do you think you retired at the right time?
I felt lucky, you know, there's an old saying around the league. I say I gave them 9 of my best years, so they owe me a couple, you know. I truly felt that I was ready to retire the year before I retired, but the San Francisco 49ers, Bill Walsh, when he got there, and Eddie DeBartolo, I mean, you're talking class people there, and I bet, other than my glory years with the electric company and Reggie and Bubby and the guys in, you know, 73, 4, and 5, the most fun I ever had in football and was that last year in San Francisco. Bill Walsh kept it loose. He brought Al Cowlings, the guy I was telling you about earlier, back. And after Al had been out of the game for a year, Al came and played that final season with the 49ers. And here are 2 lifelong friends playing their last season together for their hometown team. all the young players, Montana and Clark, and the entire offensive line except Bubba Parrish was the kids that were there. And I mean, we just had a good time. They'd come over to my condominium and hang out a little bit. I'd tell them stories about when I was in the league earlier, in my career, and you knew that this group of guys would be champs one day. And if I have any regret is that I wasn't young enough to hang around for a couple of more years to play with this group of guys, because I knew they'd be champs. And when I go up there now, I feel a part of the team. I even got Super Bowl rings and cufflinks from Eddie them as a part of the San Francisco 49ers. So I feel real close, even closer, even though I am a Buffalo Bill, and that's what I'll be remembered for. I'm in the Hall of Fame because of my experience in Buffalo. I relate right now to the 49ers because I played with the majority of those guys. The Bills, I haven't played with anybody who's in Buffalo at this point, but all my former teammates who are playing are 49ers.
There's got to be something very sad to see somebody hang around just that 1 or 2 years too long. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. What is it that makes somebody do that?
The love of the game. When you've been an athlete your whole life, I mean, it's your whole life. From my first conscious thought as far as career was concerned, it's been to be an athlete. Not, a professional athlete or an athlete, to be on a team. And all of a sudden, you're at an age where you just can't go out and have a pickup football game, maybe on the 4th of July or something, you throw the ball around. But, I mean, all your life you've been a part of something. And I think I related to male menopause, I guess, because you reach a point where all of a sudden you realize there's something about yourself that is different, that I can't do this anymore. Well, imagine being 31 and going through that experience. All of a sudden I'm not what I once was. And you talk about being conscious of aging. It's a pretty traumatic experience.
Play a little word association. I'll throw a name at you. You just tell me the first thing that comes into your mind. Jim Brown.
Jim Brown, the best. Powerful, aggressive, angry.
John McKay.
Funny. Funny. Knowledgeable. The man knew the game of football or running the football.
Lou Saban.
My savior.
Howard Cosell.
A friend who's a friend. Yeah. The coach. I mean, I call Howard because it's hard to say one word with Howard. Howard he's been, I guess, for the last 15 years, a good friend. I just wish he was happier. I don't think he's the happiest person right now.
Joe Namath.
A hero. Joe did something for all of us as players. He was the first guy that humanized the hero. When he said he liked his Johnny Walker red and his women blonde, I mean, all of a sudden we had to say, hey, this guy's a football player, but he's also a real person. And it's made it easier for everybody who followed him.
Frank Gifford.
Class. The guy is class. I don't look at too many people and say, I wish I can be like him. But I look at Frank Gifford and say, hey, as I go on, I wish I can be more like Frank Gifford.
O.J. Simpson.
A good guy. A nice guy. Talented.
Coming up next, sports columnist Dick Young with the final out. And a look at the NFL through the camera's eye when Stroh's Circle of Sports continues.
He walked in his first major league at bat, then ran to first. And in the ensuing 23 seasons, Peter Edward Rose has run all the way to the brink of breaking one of baseball's most cherished records, the all-time hit mark of 4,191 set by the immortal Ty Cobb. Already, Rose has played in more games and won more than any man in history, not to mention 16 All-Star appearances and playing in 34 World Series games. And today, at 44, having revitalized the Reds as their manager and spiritual leader, Rose is the happiest senior citizen any of us have seen since on Golden Pond. And it is that joy, the love he's given to baseball, that makes him so unique. First Cobb, then immortality. The remarkable Pete Rose, our Stroh salute. Certainly, Pete Rose is a striking contrast to the so-called modern athlete, whom many view as spoiled. With his views on the subject, here is the syndicated sports columnist of the New York Post, Dick Young, with the final out.
I really feel sorry for the modern-day athlete, particularly the ball player. Now, that may sound strange because of all the money they're making, but they're not having the fun that the older ball player used to have. That's one thing I've noticed. Great wealth seems to kill fun in life. I can remember the old teams, particularly the Brooklyn Dodgers, whom I covered at the start of my career. They always were enjoying life. They would be laughing. They'd be going out to dinner together. There was a tremendous camaraderie on that ball club. Today, ball players don't smile as much. They don't laugh as much. They seem to be afraid that they're going to lose that great money that they're making. And the fear of that is what weighs heavily upon them. I can remember Pete Rose saying just a few years ago, it's not as much fun as it used to be. And I said, Pete, you know why it's not as much fun as it used to be? You're making a lot of money now, and you're thinking about that money. You never thought about money. You used to think about only the game. And he disagreed with me. He says, no, I'm still enjoying this game. I'm still putting out and hustling, and I love it. And I said, yes, but subconsciously, you're thinking of the day when that money won't be there any longer. And that's what's killing your fun.
With the pro football season now underway, we went to one of the outstanding photographers who takes many of the photos you see every week in the NFL game programs. So here is photographer Peter Reed Miller, through the camera's eye.
My name is Peter Reed Miller. I've been photographing pro football for the NFL magazines Pro and Game Day and for Sports Illustrated since 1973. Before that, I covered college football for USC. Although I photograph many sports, pro football is far and away my favorite. I like the action, I like the people of the game, and I like the fact that photographers are not restricted to specific positions. We're all down on the sidelines, and with the exception of the bench area, we can photograph from wherever we want. So, in a way, a photographer covering football faces some of the same problems as a player or a coach. Consider the game situation, anticipate what's going to happen next, position yourself accordingly, and be ready for the unexpected. This is Denver's Mile High Stadium, September 1977. The season the Broncos went 12-2 and played in the Super Bowl. It's a beautiful October day in Colorado, opening kickoff against the Raiders. Each fan held up an orange card. It was an electric moment. Some players, like the Raiders running back Marcus Allen, seem to have a style and grace that makes them naturally photogenic. Another player with that great quality is Detroit's Billy Sims. Here he glides to one of the 3 touchdowns he scored against the Rams in his NFL debut in 1980. Although this photograph of Eric Dickerson was taken in the studio and not on the field, I still feel that it captures the concentration and intensity that characterize Eric's running. An aspect of football that has always fascinated me is the element of man-to-man competition. In this photograph, Earl Campbell and Nolan Cromwell go one-on-one, 2 of the best in the game in their respective positions. Here, Russ Washington of the Chargers tries to get the upper hand on Jim Stuckey of the 49ers. Despite the best efforts of 2 Seattle Seahawks defenders, All-Pro receiver Cliff Branch brings down a reception. This photo was taken in the Los Angeles Coliseum during the 1984 preseason. Although preseason games rarely produce memorable action photos, the late summer evenings can provide some fascinating lighting. Sometimes a wider view can reveal a different aspect of the game. This photo, taken from high in the end zone at San Diego Stadium, shows the Charger offensive line setting up pass protection for quarterback Dan Fouts. 49ers practice facility in Redwood City, California, one of the last practices before OJ's retirement. I know this was a very bittersweet time for OJ, and I feel this shot captures that mood. This is Hall of Fame defensive tackle Merlin Olsen, one of the greatest players I've ever photographed on the field and one of the greatest people I've ever worked with off the field. Merlin was one of the original fearsome foursome, and even in 1976, his last year in the NFL, he was still a terrifying sight to behold from the viewpoint of a quarterback. This is a receiver's eye view of Brian's sight. He's just released the pass and he's about to get hit. I like the quality of imminent disaster in this photo. 1977 Rams-Vikings divisional playoff. The worst conditions I've ever photographed a game under in Los Angeles. By the fourth quarter, the only way you could tell the teams apart was by their helmets. This is Coach Tom Flores after the Raiders' victory in Super Bowl 18. To make this picture, I slipped into the Raiders' locker room with about a minute remaining in the game. I wanted to be in a position to capture their enthusiasm the moment they came off the field. This photo is more suggestive of war than sport. It reminds me that football is a game, but it's played for keeps. I think most people see pro football in a very standardized format. Every Sunday on the screen, the teams are different, the scores are different, but the viewpoint remains the same. There's very little of the sense of a specific game, of the feeling of the moment. In my photographs, I've tried to capture that sense of the game, of what it was really like to be there.
Next up, we'll see what's on Bino's clipboard when Stroh's Circle of Sport continues.
Another Stroh's and a Stroh light. So, with 30 seconds left, Monroe hits from the corner. But Goodrich comes right back with a 15-footer off the glass. Now, the Pearl gets the ball again with only 3 seconds left. 2, 1. You missed. So did the Pearl.
Stroh's and Stroh Light. Fire brewed for great taste and good times.
This weekend, I'm seeing Rum. I got the Camaro. I'm seeing the folks, so I got a Chevette. My sister's in town this weekend with their kids.
You need a big car.
For just the right car, ask National for their low weekend rates, starting as low as $19.95 a day for an economy car like the Chevy Chevette.
For my class reunion, the Cadillac.
Weekends it pays to get national attention.
My, said the butterfly.
What you say?
Have you heard the news?
No, tell me about it.
I've got the blues.
Deliver.
The Levi's 501 blues.
They shrink the fit.
That's it, and they're right beside.
Do tell.
My personalized the Levi's 501 blues.
Lucky fly.
Ain't I?
My.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Do you know what kills your muffler? Rust. Rust that can start on the inside and eat its way through. Now there's a muffler that helps stop this problem. The new Walker Advantage with a revolutionary rust inhibitor, Absorbite, that actually absorbs internal moisture. The inside of this muffler was not protected with Absorbite. This muffler was. You can see the difference. The new Walker Advantage. It puts rust at a disadvantage.
Warranted at service outlets and auto parts stores where you see this sign.
Before we say goodnight, let's check in once again with Bino Cook and see what's on his clipboard.
The college football season has finally arrived. That's the good news. I also have some bad news. The hype for the Heisman Trophy is going to get worse. See, it started last January, so you know it's going to get worse. It started a few seconds after the end of the Orange Bowl. I got releases, and so did everybody else. Everybody's a candidate in January and February. Candidate. I guess it's the way it is when you run for president in 1988. Everybody's a candidate. I don't know. I liked it years ago. You didn't give much thought to the Heisman Trophy until late October, early November. And you said, gee, who's having a good year? I like 1962, Terry Baker. You know why? Single-wing tailback, a dying breed, like an honest politician. But still, you didn't give much thought to it, and here it was. You voted, and that was it. It wasn't a big thing. Now, in the middle 60s, I think, I'm not sure, the hype started. Slick brochures, telegrams, messages in the sky. Boy, and it's getting worse. Booster clubs are involved now. You get phone calls at home. It's terrible. My favorite story concerns Paul Hornung back in 1956. That's when you could buy a candy bar for a nickel, and it was all chocolate. That's how long ago it was. Charlie Callahan told his student assistant, Joe Price, get Paul Hornung for me. He got Paul Hornung about 15 minutes later. He took Paul back to the office, walked into Charlie Callahan's office, and Charlie was on the phone. Charlie put the phone down for a second, covered it up, and said to Paul, it's your mother, Paul. Tell her you just won the Heisman Trophy. I don't know. That story is romantic to me. There was no mass media, no wires, no planes, no nothing. Just Joe Bride, Paul Hornung, and Charlie Callahan. Long time ago, when college football was less commercial and life was less complicated.
Well, that concludes our show for tonight, the final in our initial series. All of us connected with Stroh's Circle of Sports want to thank you for joining us. We hope we've been able to make your summer just a little more enjoyable. We've tried to hold true to our promise to bring you stories behind the scenes and the people who make the headlines. To all of those people who have been part of Stroh's Circle of Sports, our thanks. And a personal thank you from me to David Martin of Stroh's for making this show a reality. So from all of us, I'm Robert Conrad saying good night. We look forward to seeing you in the future on Stroh's Circle of Sports. And let Uncle Bob tell you one thing. I've always lived my life like this. You keep your chin down, your hands up, and keep your butt off the canvas, and you'll do all right. Good night.
Stroh's Circle of Sports has been brought to you by the Stroh Brewery Company, makers of Stroh's and Stroh Light, fire brewed for great taste and good times. By National Car Rental, you deserve national attention.
Be sure to tune in this Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern for a special WrestleMania event, the Slam Challenge between Andre the Giant and Big John Studd on Prime Time Wrestling. And tomorrow night at 8 Eastern, don't miss Harvey Korman and Buddy Hackett in Bud and Lou, the story of Abbott and Costello on the USA Premier event.